It's a great pleasure and honor to be here. I'm not an educator. I don't know pedagogy, but I know a little bit about EU and EU policy. I work for the DECA project, which is a Finnish vast research consortium of 7 research institutions. And I've been with Nordis from the beginning, as well as part of EDMO, the European Digital Media Observatory, so the umbrella organization for all the hubs within Europe, hubs like Nordis. And I've been in the working group thinking of how on earth do we monitor platforms, especially the very large online platforms, and what do they do? And part of that monitoring is, we've been thinking about how to monitor what they do in terms of literacy. So what do we really know? I'm so sorry to tell you, but it's a sad story, maybe a public service announcement with warnings and call to action. And the short answer is we know very little. We should know a lot. I know you know this, but just as a recap, the EU Code of Practice on Disinformation, the sort of upgraded version in 2022, it had existed before, but it was updated then. It became kind of a Go regulation tool for very large online platforms under the Digital Services Act. And what is very large online platforms? This is the EU definition. So we know those actors from Meta to TikTok to X. And one requirement in this Go regulation or guide was for these platforms to create tools that empower users, for instance, to detect and flag false or misleading content. And specifically, Commitment 17, continue and strengthen their efforts in the area of media literacy and critical thinking, also with the aim to include vulnerable groups, with tools, activities, and collaboration with the EU, with EDMO, the European Digital Media Observatory, as well as NGOs within the EU that deal with these issues. So what do the platforms do then if they've committed to this Go regulatory tool? And how do we know? The EDMO has been one of the bodies to think how to monitor that, and the platforms need to report biannually about what they do in these kind of code of practice on disinformation reports. And I'm going to show what they report, especially about literacy, with one example of TikTok. I, together with a German colleague, looked at the TikTok's Code of Practice report, the last one from beginning of 2024 until mid-year. And TikTok obviously is very much used. I'm sorry, the graph there is hard to read, but you can see that it is very popular, especially in Sweden. It is 3.57 million users. These are the recent figures I got from Statista. In the middle, we have a news piece from Finland from mid-2024, where a significant number of members of the parliament thought that, yeah, maybe we should ban TikTok. It's harmful. And then, of course, from, I think this was last week, one user of TikTok going to Etsy, which is this sort of a platform for arts and crafts, trying to engage a witch to to cast a spell so that TikTok would not be banned in the US. So a very, TikTok is very much in the middle of controversy and so much loved and despised by different communities. So what does TikTok report? They give some basic materials, basic descriptions really, in their so-called transparency center. They talk about their recommendation system, their responsible, transparent AI-generated content, how they deal with it. They talk about how they deal with integrity of elections. In their safety center, they talk about harmful misinformation, election integrity, and they have a newsroom where they post on new developments. They have a monthly transparency report on covert influence operations. Wow. And they have topical intervention tools on the platforms in particular topics such as elections, for instance, EU elections, the Israel-Hamas conflict, climate change, COVID-19, Holocaust denial, the war in Ukraine, as main examples that they list. And they have video notice tags, so learn more about this topic. They report, they do search interventions, so somebody's searching these topics, so they prompt, verify if this content is real, links to trusted sources. They have public service announcements. They have unverified content label. So if they label something that is unverified, the person cannot share, and it's flagged for the user. They have state-controlled media labels, so if some content is from state-controlled media, they say they label it, and they provide AI-generated content labels for creators so that the creators can disclose what has been created with AI. Now, who is on TikTok here? Okay? Have you seen any of these? Who has seen some of these on your feed? Pipsa is the only one. You're a fact checker lead. So, okay. How many? And often or sometimes or?
During the EU elections sometimes.
Sometimes during the EU elections. Well, as we can see, obviously, these tools, at least from sort of anecdotal experience, are not so often meeting the audience. So they also report what they've done all around Europe. They talk about the Nordic countries, that they've done special campaigns in Sweden and Denmark and Finland. I don't know what the Swedish campaign is. They mention it, but they never explain it in their report. They said they did a general literacy campaign in Denmark, and then very proudly they declare how they did a campaign in the presidential election. During the presidential election, they said they collaborated with Mediataitokoulu, which is through our sort of official regulator, the audiovisual KAVI, the National Audiovisual Institute, and they collaborated with Logically Facts, which is a fact-checking organization. Wonderful stuff that they did. Did anybody in Finland on TikTok around the election see any of this? Pipsa. No, even Pipsa didn't see anything. Okay. And then they give these wonderful figures. I'm looking at them. I have no idea how to verify them. So impressions and clicks for these particular campaigns. But yeah, maybe not. Interestingly enough, Pipsa pointed out that in one marketing magazine, I suppose, website, there was a news item that TikTok and Logically Facts made this wonderful campaign, 6 million views of their educational videos. You know, in Finnish, for the Finnish election campaign, we're, 5.3 million people in Finland, 5.4? Anyway, yeah, so. Faktapari fact-checked. I brought this info to them. So obviously, these labels by TikTok look great, but they're very infrequent and very inconsistent. So whatever is labeled and something that should be labeled necessarily isn't. Very limited number of partners. And I would say all European-wide. We checked with my German colleague. And there's very little transparency what TikTok does when it collaborates with a fact-checker or literacy organization. We don't know if there are any NDAs. We don't know what the rules are. And very basic campaigns. Also regarding the Finnish elections, when I personally didn't see it. I'm not on TikTok, I admit. But I heard that it was just basic, verify the information that you see. It wasn't sort of election-specific necessarily. And This, I thought, was kind of incredible, but I don't think it's unique. All the data that the platforms have, they don't use to create very impactful literacy interventions. And I think this is such a shame, and this is horrid, to be honest, because only they know. Researchers don't know, literacy folks don't know, fact checkers really don't know. We don't have that kind of data they have. And really the impact is very unclear. These reports report figures and facts that we just don't have access to, or we can't verify. And this is just my personal opinion. I don't represent anybody, but it makes me think how much this is a PR rather than literacy work. Why does this matter? Couple of things about the Nordics. Everybody thinks we're fantastic and wonderful regarding literacy, and so we are. But within Nordics, we did a nationwide survey in these 4 countries a year and a half ago. And it's incredible that 60+% of the respondents report that they encountered disinformation very often, or somewhat often. Obviously, we don't know if they really did. This is the feeling of the respondents. This is the assessment of the respondents of this survey. And also, 20+% of people said, I don't know if I did or not. I am not sure. I don't know. And only about half of the people said, I feel pretty confident that I can assess what is fake and what is truthful content. Finns were a little bit higher on that, so good for us. Here is the link to that study. Some more insights. People are worried. Obviously, we did this in 2022, so the information warfare, or sort of foreign information interference, is high in the worry, especially in Finland in this case, but remember also the NATO membership and all of that. The lighter blue one is worried about fake news, and just in general this sense that there's too much information, too much social media impact. So even in these countries that are harbingers, sort of often talked about as the promoters of literacy, the best countries for media freedom, yeah, okay, we have high level of trust in legacy media, and we're very critical of social media, but it's clear that for the Nordic Nordic people, it's ever harder to assess the veracity and reliability of information. And we start to see also in our study that there are so-called affected polarizations. So opinions start to get polarized. People start to think very differently and very emotionally about certain issues. And we have epistemic or knowledge communities. So little communities have their own kind of trusted sources and start to distrust shared sources of information. And then we asked, who's accountable? What do you think this symbolizes? The response was, we as individuals are accountable. Nobody else can do it for us. This is the kind of overwhelming feeling that we don't know what's fake, we don't know how to assess veracity, and at the same time, I guess we individually need to know and check that out. Nobody can help us. So, and just look at this. This is just a highlight, for instance, if we get back to TikTok. Faktabari and Czech first did this amazing research, and Faktabari folks can talk more about it, how they did it, but they looked at TikTok's recommendation algorithm during the Finnish presidential elections, and clearly there's a huge impact. And what does TikTok does to help us with literacy? Very little. So call to action, people. Just exactly a week ago, so-called the Global Information Climate Report was published. And I mean this seriously. This report is supposed to provide us a similar kind of overview of our information sphere as the climate report. And it has many sections. One is on literacy. And It highlights the fact that we, again, because we don't have the data, we know very little about impact of dis and misinformation. There's no silver bullet, but all kinds of literacy efforts have some impact. And by the way, I was kind of consulted for this, and me and many other scholars, and this is based on thousands and thousands of peer-reviewed research, just saying. Also, something we don't talk about enough is that in this sphere, and especially with AI coming, really we don't talk about people's rights, communication or knowledge rights, and especially for children and young people, this is very difficult because they don't decide themselves. So the rights-based approach needs to be more highlighted, and not just skills, civic education. I think in the Nordics we're very good with that, thankfully, and then contextualization. And that's why I say we should walk and work together in the Nordic countries. We really need to protect and celebrate the Nordic so-called digital media welfare state. And I am asking you, what is our vision? And what are the real actions by different stakeholders? And what can we do in the Nordics to give to Europe or globally? Just to point out that we actually have a set of recommendations, visions, and actions from a think tank of the Nordic Council of Ministers called A Nordic Approach to Democratic Debate in the Age of Big Tech, and literacy obviously is a key vision and action there as well. So we have sort of policy recommendations to that. So, what can you do? Start. The EDMO is still continuing this sort of monitoring work. I looked at TikTok's transparency report for the code of practice. You can answer this questionnaire as an expert in literacy. It's a huge questionnaire, but just answer literacy or whatever part you want to answer and tell your opinion, because we need some kind of accountability since we don't have the data, since we don't have such collaboration, and it doesn't seem the collaboration between the big platforms is getting any better anytime soon. So let us at least have EDMO to hear our voice. And then I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minna. That was very clear, and perhaps just to contextualize, we picked up TikTok because we don't have, let's say, resources to monitor all of them, but we thought that at least this would be justified, especially in the eyes of the who really uses the media, who uses the media as at least studied in Finland. I mean, TikTok is, so to say, the primary source of news for youngsters. I mean, I'm sometimes wondering what do they consider nowadays as a news, but anyway, so this was, so to say, important, and that's why we focused on TikTok. But I think most of the stuff that we were discussing and about the lack of transparency as such would pretty much go to also to the American platforms as such. So this kind of banning now the TikTok for security matters only is just one aspect of it. But any questions to Minna from online or here offline, so to say, because this is certainly a topic of discussion at the moment, and we are hearing all the time in the news. TikTok perhaps a little bit less in the last couple of weeks, but it always comes in trends. I've been following this 10 years, so it's always like who is in the loop, who are they attacking first, and whereas we should make a kind of systemic change and put the accountability to work for, ideally for all of them and in the same line.
Can I say something before anybody asks anything? We are looking at all the very large online platforms. My colleagues all around Europe are taking a look at Meta, X, and so on and so forth, and their transparency reports for the code of practice, haha. And so some platforms do better. Google has funded activities much more than TikTok has, and so on and so forth. And we will also publish a report, or ETMO will publish a report what the platforms really say about literacy, but also about collaboration with fact checkers, also about their internal governance in terms of disinformation and so on and so forth. So look out for that. I hope it's going to be published in February.
Oh. Can we expect a kind of easy benchmarking, so somehow like who is doing better, who is improving at least, or something like that? Because that should be at least a kind of a market-based approach, that you are not just because of the headlines, but you could see the kind of development over time, and at least like investment to the media literacy. That is a very poor industry, if any, and still seems to be now the one that everybody goes for, because next to the policy line that of course it's struggling also at the moment, but EU at least keeping hold. And as I suppose we have a commentary from the Australia who has been fighting back as well. Yeah. So any questions from the audience? Heikki, please.
Thank you for your presentation. How would you assess and estimate one VLOP named Wikipedia? It's one of the VLOPs, and it's a global non-profit organization, and it's very different compared with this commercial. Do you have any notions? I would like to hear a comparable sort of a survey on all these reports from EU.
That's an excellent question, and unfortunately I have no idea, because I only dealt with TikTok. We were, I would say, 25 scholars who committed to going through the transparency report, but as I said, around, I hope, as early as beginning of February or early February, ETMO will gather all the information as well as your answers to the questionnaire and compile a comprehensive report, and then we'll know. But I promise we'll keep you on the loop, and everybody who's been here, and anyway we'll post about it, I hope on Faktabari's website, and also I think we'll write about TikTok especially, because I was part of the Nordic Council of Ministers think tank thinking about sort of our Nordic values, and it was so interesting that during that process I got contacted by TikTok various times. So they're very keen on, how would I put it, interacting. I believe Kari has been also in a panel, and I would love to hear, Kari, your view, because you discussed with a representative of TikTok how wonderful they see TikTok as an educational and media literacy tool themselves. So they're very invested in this field. What they do is another matter.
Yes, indeed. I've been in the same panel discussions with the TikTok Nordic representative, and I have to say that I was quite astonished on the approach. So first of all, TikTok says that it's a micro-learning platform. Millions of youngsters, millions of people are learning new skills from TikTok short videos. And we have to admit that it's partly true. There are a lot of videos which are having kind of educational, I mean, you learn new skills, practical things in the life. Also, the second was a really astonishing claim. I mean, it kind of was trying to make TikTok very positive. And everybody who has been 10 minutes in TikTok knows what it is. So they said that TikTok is promoting reading skills in the world. And the evidence behind it, and it's true, I checked it, that if there is an influencer in TikTok who says that this book is wonderful, go and buy it, it's #1 in the best-selling books next day. And they kind of have this book talk, where young people are presenting their favorite books, and indeed it adds reading in. So, like all the social media platforms, it's not entirely negative. But if we are comparing the balance between positive effects and something the violence, the sexistic, racistic, all kind of thing which is kind of fleeting there, even if you are not looking for it, the positive sides starts to be quite, how to say, yeah, worth mentioning, but that's not the whole truth. But indeed, I would say that TikTok has also an important place in the heart of the youngsters. It's that they use it, they love it, they are spending their time with it. They are sharing strange things there, and it's part of the amusement. And we should not ignore this power, and we should maybe use the same skills ourselves to do a little bit of marketing using the same means, in a positive sense.
But to me, that kind of explains a little bit like how this BookTok phenomenon explains like how good a marketing tool it is. And let's face it, you replace any, let's say, social media. First of all, they are not social, and they are more like a marketing tools as such. If you replace it with a marketing tool, then you can say that they are able to market even the books, so to say. But it's a different way of approaching. Yeah, I will give the, okay. Yep, please, yeah. I think so, yeah.
Some years ago, I met a lady from South Africa who she was the director of Google Africa, and she claimed that Google has this educative, non-commercial side, which is somewhat is true. The same kind of comment. These big companies they want to give an image, at least give an image of this kind of activity.
Yep. Minna.
Absolutely, but going back to BookTok and what TikTok reports and what they claim they do with Logical and whatnot, imagine if they would really boost, if they would really give some resources to true literacy work and really boost it. And I mean, the opportunities would be endless. But anyway, here we are.
It's a little bit where you put your effort, and that's why it's so important that efforts like that, however badly resourced, still at this stage, we try to kind of keep them accountable what they are really doing and what they are reporting, because I personally believe there is a big unbalance with that one, unmatch of that one, but I think this is something, this evidence building, you can all contribute. So please go to Minna for the link if you didn't pick it up already, and you can reply to that one. And I know that in parallel there is many efforts to collect that, and the EDMO is just one, but very important channel for independent thing that is not even considered as a kind of stakeholder, because these things are getting obviously rough in forthcoming weeks and months as the digital power is kind of battling with the political power, as we will see.